Friends, the people of Zimbabwe, fellow compatriots, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to talk about the pandemic that is afflicting Zimbabwe beyond COVID.
Mukadzi waGilbert ane kamwe kakusazunguzikira zvinhu so kakusachachari.
That pandemic is the pandemic of corruption, the scourge of corruption. Corruption has become so key and structural in our country, Zimbabwe. It has become easily the biggest existential threat that our country faces. And since the coup of November 2017, corruption has become so entrenched and so deep-rooted. And the challenge with this corruption is that it affects every length and breadth of Zimbabwe. It affects every sphere of Zimbabwean life. It has become a huge threat to people's livelihoods. It has become a huge threat to the existence of Zimbabwe itself as a nation state. It has become a huge threat to the prospects of a sustainable economic recovery. It is putting a premium on Zimbabwe as a country. It is putting a premium on our capacity to develop, and it is putting a premium on our human social indices. As I'm talking to you right now, we are now ranked by Transparency International number 160 out of 180. One way of expressing it is that we are the 20th most corrupt country in the world. And one of the most shocking things is that we've overtaken countries that have been traditionally been associated with extraction, such as Nigeria. And I have no doubt in my mind that with the accelerated manner in which corruption is being carried out in Zimbabwe, we will overtake literally every African country on our continent. I want to give you some of the figures. Gold alone, US $1.5 billion worth of gold is being smuggled annually from Zimbabwe, which translates to between 40 to 50 tons of gold that is being shipped out of Zimbabwe illegally. The major destination is South Africa. The major destination is Dubai. Diamonds, millions and millions of carats are being shipped out of Zimbabwe, even after the low levels of production that are taking place at Marange. We estimated that between 2009 and 2014, Zimbabwe lost 15 billion US dollars worth of diamonds illegally, a figure which was also confirmed by the late President Robert Mugabe. In our estimation, the figure is much, much bigger than $15 billion. We are losing around US $1 billion through cigarette smuggling done by a cartel, which I will mention later on. So we are essentially losing around $3 billion US dollars worth of resources through corruption in resources. And this excludes what we are losing in the form of illicit financial flows, IFFs. Globally, Africa loses around $86.6 billion in the form of illicit financial flows. Zimbabwe is contributing anything between 4 to 5 billion US dollars of that figure. What concerns me is that a large part of Zimbabwe's hemorrhage and leakage is also actually coming now through treasury, through central government. We know from the audited statements of the Auditor General that 2.7 billion US dollars was stolen and lost directly through treasury in 2017. 3.5 billion US dollars was lost directly through treasury in 2018. And the recently released audit report of 2019 shows a loss of 7.6 billion US dollars lost through treasury. So in 3 years, over and above the budget deficit, around 14 billion US dollars has been lost through the Ministry of Finance. And this is concerning because the Ministry of Finance traditionally is an oversight ministry. It is a gatekeeper. So it beholds the mind when the gatekeeper becomes the principal gate crusher. And I need to say that beyond this 14 billion US dollars, Parliament right now has pending before it, a financial adjustment bill in respect of which the executive, the government of the day, is seeking condonation of the sum of 10.6 billion US dollars. That was again lost through treasury between 2015 and 2017. So between 2015 and 2019, Zimbabwe has lost 10.6 billion US dollars accounted for by the financial adjustment bill, then 14 billion US dollars in the form of $2.7 billion lost in 2017, $3.5 billion lost in 2018, and $7.6 billion lost in 2019. There is more in 2020. There is more in 2019. So the bottom line is that Zimbabwe has essentially become a criminal enterprise. Zimbabwe has essentially become a mafia state. Zimbabwe has essentially become a criminal enterprise, a kakistocracy. Those that are presiding over the state are essentially engaged in the total emasculation of Zimbabwe to ensure the continued reproduction of extractive relations and the rent-seeking behavior. And two things matter to those that are running our country, namely the power retention agenda. They will do anything for the purposes of power retention, including stealing elections, killing people, as we saw on the 1st of August 2018, killing people, raping people, as we saw in January 2019, the emasculation of civic society, the emasculation and dismantlement of the official opposition, the MDC alliance, the arrest of civic activists, journalists like Wopolo Chingono, and so forth. But power is inextricably connected with looting. Whereas under President Mugabe, it was power for the sake of power. Under Emerson Mnangagwa, power is a means to an end, and that end is extraction. That end is looting. That end is corruption. There is a key characteristic of those that are looting, which has been brilliantly been exposed by two reports that have just come out. And I need to say that there are 4 sets of documents that anyone interested in this subject ought to read. The first one are the report by the Auditor General from 2014 to 2019, being the last report. The second set of source documents are the reports coming from Parliament and its portfolio committees. In particular, the reports by the Public Accounts Committee, which we've done, the report on the central bank, the report on the Ministry of Finance, the report on Zinara, the forthcoming report on Command Agriculture. Those should be read. The report by various other portfolio committees, including the reports by the Minister of Agriculture, by the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture and the Portfolio Committee on Transport, which have all exposed the massive omissions and commissions in this government.
Everything in life is a negotiation. When you cross the street is a negotiation. Getting your coffee at Starbucks is a...
The two reports and the Portfolio Committee on Transport, which have all exposed the massive omissions and commissions in this government. The two reports done by external researchers, one has been done by ARC and is called Cartel Power Dynamics in Zimbabwe. It was done and published by the Daily Maverick in January of 2021. That report must be read by anyone seriously interested in the subject of corruption in Zimbabwe. The second report, a very powerful report, is the report produced by the Central Organization headed Shadows and Shell Games, uncovering an offshore business empire in Zimbabwe. What these reports brilliantly show is the fact that the corruption in Zimbabwe is now inextricably connected to international extraction, to international money laundering. So Zimbabwe has become a key hub of international money laundering. Much of the money that is being siphoned from Zimbabwe is being housed in the offshore resort of Mauritius. And I would like to argue that key Mauritian financial institutions are essentially Zimbabwean institutions, which are housing illicit flows from Zimbabwe. So too the Cayman Islands, and to a very small extent, Switzerland. So we need an international response to the crisis of corruption in Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwean authorities, in the form of the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, the National Prosecuting Authorities, are not equal to the task of dismantling the international structures of illicit financial flows and extraction that are now essentially harbored and originating in Zimbabwe, but with huge international tentacles in places such as Belarus, places such as Russia, places such as South Africa, places such as Switzerland, places such as Singapore, places such as Dubai, places such as India for our diamonds, places such as Hong Kong, places such as China, which are so key in the aspect of extracting loot from Zimbabwe. And if you do a comparison of the key characters that are looting Zimbabwe, and I'm going to mention them, and you compare some international looters that we've lived with, people like Suharto, for instance, the Marcos regime in the Philippines. The key challenge with Zimbabwe is that it's dominated by roving bandits. Now, there's a difference between roving bandits and stationary bandits. Stationary bandits are like Suharto. Stationary bandits are like Marcos. They will steal, but they will make sure that the economy and the citizen also benefits. The challenge with Zimbabwe's roving bandits is that they leave nothing for the ordinary average individual. They leave nothing for Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe is extremely poor, yet it's generating billions and billions of dollars. It's only them and their children who are eating, as it were. It's only them and their children who are benefiting. And we see the results of their children eating. Their children are driving vehicles that cost $4 million US, $5 million US. If you go to Semlevis village, You see Lamborghinis being driven there. You see Ferraris being driven there. All kinds of luxury vehicles in Zimbabwe. Yet, 79% of our people are living in extreme poverty, surviving on less than US $1.25 a day. Thousands of Zimbabweans now dying through COVID because the government has failed to provide social safety nets and grants to our people. Our human resources index have collapsed. Our maternal mortality rates are now 96 out of 1,000 mothers. Our infant mortality rates are now 102 out of 1,000. In the last 2 years, teachers have not gone to school because they're being paid peanuts. In the last 2 years, nurses have hardly gone to school because they're being paid peanuts. The public health system has collapsed. The public transport system has collapsed. The public education system has collapsed thanks to to the roving bandits we have. So the difference between a roving bandit and a stationary bandit is that the stationary bandit will milk 6 barrels of milk. You steal 2 and leave 4 for the population. The roving bandit will milk 6 barrels of milk. You steal those 6 jugs of milk. You also steal the cow so that there is no milk to be milked from a cow. And that's the biggest challenge with Zimbabwe. It's full of roving bandits. Now, I want to talk about the commanding heights of this corruption. The 6th one is Treasury, the Ministry of Finance. The 7th one is public procurement. Will milk 6 barrels of milk. You steal 2 and leave 4 for the population. The roving bandit will milk 6 barrels of milk. You steal those 6 jugs of milk. You also steal the cow so that there is no milk to be milked from a cow. And that's the biggest challenge with Zimbabwe. It's full of roving bandits. Now I want to talk about the commanding heights of this corruption. There are essentially 9 commanding heights of corruption. In other words, 9 football pitches where corruption is panning out and where corruption is being played out. The first one is, of course, the US dollar and access to the US dollar, which inevitably makes the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe a commanding height of corruption. The second one is fuel. The third one is command agriculture. The 4th one is mining. The 5th one is the transport sector. The 6th one is Treasury, the Ministry of Finance. The 7th one is public procurement, contracts. The 8th one is cigarettes. The 9th one is subsidies. And I want to talk briefly about these commanding heights of corruption. The government of national unity dollarized the economy, and in the process it decommodified the US dollar. The US dollar became plentiful and aboundful. It became the major currency of trade in Zimbabwe. It became the major instrument of trade in Zimbabwe. When we introduced the US dollar, it killed the arbitrage that the Zimbabwean dollar had been subjected to through speculative behavior and manipulation of the exchange rate. This regime in 2016 introduced a surrogate currency called the bond note. And once you introduced a fiat currency, bad money chases good money. So in no time at all, the dominant currency of the day became the bond note or the RTGS. So in no time at all, the parallel exchange rate had returned. In February of 2019, the government introduced SI 33 of 2019, which officially recognized the existence of an RTG as a dollar of a local currency, which also partially liberalized this dollar. It allowed it to defloat from the fixed exchange rate of 1:1. In June of 2019, the government of the day enacted statutory instrument 142 of 2019, which officially de-dollarized the economy. It made the Zimbabwean dollar the sole currency of exchange in Zimbabwe. But of course, that created arbitrage. It created massive arbitrage in that the economy was trading in US dollars. And there is no economy that is traded in US dollars. There is no economy that is involuntarily dollarized, that has been able to de-dollarize. It's just logic. It's a question of trust. So a huge parallel market then emerged, which at the present moment, as I'm talking to, the the unofficial parallel exchange rate is 1:150 or 1:55. In other words, to purchase $1, you require around 150 units of the local currency. Yet the official exchange rate determined by the weekly Dutch auction system is around 1:84, 1:85. So there is a huge chasm, a huge premium of over 60% between the official exchange rate and the unofficial parallel market exchange rate. What this means is that those that are able to access a foreign currency through official channels, i.e. the Reserve Bank, either through the formal auction system or through informal channels at the Reserve Bank, are able to access money cheaply, sometimes at 1:1, sometimes now at 1:84, which they are then able to go and sell in the parallel market at 1:150 or 1:60 or 1:30, whatever is the parallel exchange rate. And so you now have a huge coterie of people connected to the ZANU-PF regime, connected to the head of state, connected to the Reserve Bank, who are accessing foreign currency from the Reserve Bank and selling it at a premium on the black market in 4th Street. And one of the amazing things you will see is that all the currency you buy from the parallel market, they are actually crispy, brand new notes, indicating that they are being supplied by the Reserve Bank. So the Reserve Bank has essentially become the biggest trader on 4th Street, on Roodeport, the parallel market. So that means that the economy is bleeding because of the existence of a parallel market, or more importantly, because of this artificial rigged exchange rate. And this rigged exchange rate has now become an instrument of transferring resources from the poor to the rich. The poor are forced to source their money from the black market. If they get a few dollars sent by the diaspora, and by the way, Zimbabwe receives about $1 billion annually in the form of diaspora remittances, they then sell that money on the parallel exchange. But when they go into shops officially, they are forced to trade it at 1:84. Yet they can't access resources on the auction floor. So the parallel auction system is now transferring money from the poor to the rich. So you take workers, the average worker, the average civil servant used to earn $500 during the time of the GNU. He is now earning $35 to $40. When he goes into a supermarket, he is now buying goods that are indexed in real terms at the official or the unofficial parallel market rate. And if he decides to buy a US dollar, he has to go to a black market rate where he has to pay $1:150, and then go into a shop where that US dollar is now being discounted at $1:85. So it's a serious form of pauperizing the people of Zimbabwe. I want to come to fuel. Fuel is inextricably linked to abuse of foreign currency. You've got fuel cartels that are controlling Zimbabwe. The biggest is, of course, Kudata Gwirei and Sakunda, and their partner in crime, Trafigura, which is a Russian entity based in Switzerland. Then you have got the Zula group. Then you have got other small players like Trek, also owned by Kudata Gwirei, like Engine and Total. Now the big players, the Kudata Gwireis of this world, will go to the Reserve Bank and source foreign currency at 1:1 or at the official auction rate of 1:84. Then they're able to sell that money acquired from the Reserve Bank at 1:84. They will be able to sell it for a premium on the parallel exchange rate, where they'll get hundreds and thousands and millions of RTGS in local currency. They then go back and buy the original foreign currency at 1:84. So you find that the fuel companies are major players on the parallel exchange rate, including Secunda. And we know this because in June of 2019, the Reserve Bank, in July of 2019, the Reserve Bank actually officially closed Secunda's accounts in their many companies. And I'm going to read out some of these companies. Speaking of Secunda and its incestuous relationship with foreign currency, I want to mention what happened in 2019. So in January 2019, the Minister of Finance gave to Secunda US-backed treasury bills in the sum of US $360 million. That was in January of 2019. In February of 2019, the Reserve Bank introduced SI 33 of 2019, which effectively meant that if you were holding a treasury bill indexed in US dollar, that treasury bill was now effectively an RTGS dollar exchangeable at 1:1. So in the case of Secunda, if you were holding a treasury bill with US $360 million, come 23 February 2019, you are now effectively holding a treasury bill with 360 million Zimbabwean dollars or RTGS dollars. Now, everyone suffered. Everyone who was holding treasury bills suffered. And Zimbabwe was able to devalue its stock of domestic debt from around US $12 billion to a mere 12 billion RTGS dollar through the stroke of a pen, through statutory instrument 33 of 2019. But of course, Kuda is special. Secunda is special. They're well connected. So what Kuda managed to do was to force the Reserve Bank to discount his treasury bill of US $360 million through parallel market rates. So, and of course, he got some of the money in US dollars. And once he got this money, he was able to go and trade that money on the parallel exchange rate. The net result was that the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed from 1:10 to 1:25 in one day in July of 2019. Because suddenly the system finds itself with around $3 billion that was coming from the $360 million that Kudata Gwirei had. So there is an incest between the cartels and their access to foreign currency. If you were to do an audit of the beneficiaries of foreign currency since the Dutch auction system started in June of 2019, you actually find that the people who have benefited are the who's who of the cartels. Save that they've been clever, they use different shelf companies, and you have to piece the veil to go behind in order to determine who are those companies. So fuel is a major source of patronage in Zimbabwe. Kudata Gwirei and Trafigura control the pipeline. And we are paying Zimbabwean motorists. Zimbabwean fuel is the most expensive on the continent because we are paying huge levies in the form of a NOXIM debt redemption levy. If you were to remove that levy, and if you remove the carbon tax, Zimbabwean fuel will actually be comparable to the region. So you have Kuda controlling the pipeline, and every fuel that comes through Zimbabwe has to pass through that pipeline. Then he's now effectively controlling NOIC or Petrotrade. He's now effectively also the dominant player in the retail sector through his Secunda service stations, through his Puma service stations, his Trek service stations, and then of course you've got Zuva and Glencoe and the highest office in the land, all connected in this incestuous relationship. Over and above hydrocarbons, you've got Billy Rottenberg and his ethanol. A statutory instrument was passed in 2013, which made it clear that only a person in a joint venture agreement with Zimbabwe supply ethanol. So you find that Billy Rottenberg is supplying ethanol to Zimbabwe at a total cost of US $1.10 or $1.20. If Zimbabwe were to import ethanol from the biggest ethanol producing country in the world, Brazil or the United States of America or a Scandinavian country, it would land FOB at US 50 cents. But we are paying a premium to Billy Rottenberg of US $1.10 to US $1.20. So fuel is a major source of arbitrage in Zimbabwe. The third source of arbitrage is, of course, command agriculture. Now, we've spoken about command agriculture for a long time, and I will not spend a lot of time on it. Suffice to state that the resources that have been channeled by this government to command agriculture amount to 10% of gross domestic product. In real terms, at least 1.5 billion to 2 billion US dollars is channeled to command agriculture every year. If you look at the $2.7 billion I spoke for 2017, the $3.5 billion I spoke in 2018, and the $7.6 billion I spoke of in 2019, the bulk of that is command agriculture. And command agriculture has become a vehicle of stealing resources from the state, from treasury, into elites, ZANU-PF elites. So you find vehicles, luxury vehicles, with nothing to do with command agriculture have been bought. You actually find that the 2018 ZANU-PF financed the 2018 election through command agriculture. Minister Chinamasa issued a flurry of treasury bills in July of 2018 and in August, I think 10th of August of 2018. All this was to finance the ZANU-PF election. So command agriculture have become pernicious. In 2020, they hid it through a commercial bank, and they're pretending that the commercial bank is in fact disbursing its money. That is not true. The commercial bank in question is actually getting money from treasury, which it is pretending to lend out to farmers. So command agriculture is pernicious, and command agriculture must be done away with, and we have a market-based system of financing our agriculture. If we have to offer them subsidies, let's offer supply-side subsidies, not demand-side subsidies. The next form of corruption, or commanding height of corruption, is the mining sector, and this is serious. In the last 3 years, Kudata Gwirei, through 2 or 3 companies, Landela Mining and Sotic Investments, which he controls, he's acquired over 11 gold mines. These, and 6 of them came from the ZMDC. Parliament was not involved. Nobody knows how much they cost. And he has also acquired mines that were also owned by Metallion Muzi Kumar. So these mines are now hidden in a vehicle called Kuvimba Mine, but they're essentially Kudatagwire's mines. And these mines include Frida Rebecca Mine, Hau Mine, Shamva Mine, Red Wing Mine, Jenna Mine, Agriconton Mine, Sabi Mine, Hau Mine, Golden Crop Mine, and Sandawana Mine. Extensive mines, if you were to ask me. Details of this you will find in our various parliamentary reports, but you also find them in the report Shadows and the Shelge. Over and above these mines, they've also acquired Zim alloys. They've also acquired the Bindura nickel mine. And again, Parliament is not involved. So public assets are being stripped without Parliament being involved. With Zim alloys, as a matter of fact, the money that was used to purchase those shares actually came from Treasury. But we don't know how Secunda Holdings through Landela ended up being portrayed as the owner of those mines. So there is need for a forensic audit to determine the movement of resources from Treasury to Landela or Sotic. Yet the people of Zimbabwe are not getting in return these mines. A forensic audit is required. I want to talk about gold. As I've indicated before, we are losing about 40 to 50 tons of gold that are being smuggled every year. Minister of Police of Home Affairs Kazembe estimates that around 1.5 billion US dollars is being lost in gold alone. The chairperson of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Justice Matanda Moyo, actually estimates that it's much more than that. It's 3 billion US dollars. Judged by the amount of little smugglings that we have seen of people being caught, Henrietta Rushwaya, the gentleman that was caught with the 25 kilograms of gold at OR International Airport, we think that at least 3 billion US dollars or 50 tons of gold is being lost annually through smuggling. We are aware that there's a big man in Zimbabwe who smuggles gold twice a month, sorry, twice a week from Zimbabwe in the little aeroplane lands at Harare International Airport twice a week to smuggle gold to Dubai. And Dubai has become a major center of gold smuggling in Zimbabwe. They've also liberalized the gold. So some people have now been given private licenses of acquiring gold from artisanal workers, makorokozas, and also actually selling gold. So the monopoly of the Reserve Bank through Fidelity has actually been decimated, again to encourage illicit financial flows, to encourage looting of Zimbabwe. Another center of looting has become platinum resources. Every platinum resource, every platinum concession, other than the ones that are owned by the big guys, including Zimplats, are now owned by this company called GDI Investments. GDI is owned by a Russian entity and by Kuda Tagwirei. He bought those interests from the military in Zimbabwe for a purchase price of over US $220 million. And so GDI is now sitting on millions and millions of ounces of platinum resources. They've also been granted in January of 2021. They were granted serious tax concessions by Treasury, and I hope the Law Society will challenge these pernicious levels of state capture to do with GDI. Diamonds, I can speak for diamonds for the whole day. $15 billion, but we know that even up to now, over 2 million carats of diamonds are being produced every day, but nothing is being done. Another commanding height of corruption, which I didn't mention in my original list, is obviously land. Land has become a major commanding height of corruption, both urban land and rural land. With regards to rural land, multiple farm owners that were dealt with by the land reform program have now been replaced by multiple leases to white farmers. So in provinces such as Mashonaland West, in provinces such as Mashonaland East, in provinces such as Manikaland, there's now the return of white capital in the form of serial multiple farm leases, who are obviously paying a rent to ZANU-PF elites who were allocated this land. So for all intents and purposes, the land reform program has been reversed, and President Mugabe, may his soul rest in peace, is surely turning in his grave. Part of the looting also involves the $3.5 billion agreement to compensate white farmers. In principle, it's a constitutional obligation to compensate white farmers for improvements. So no one can quarrel about that constitutional obligation. The problem is that, contrary to the provisions of the Constitution, Parliament did not approve the methodology and the amount. And so Parliament does not know the beneficiaries. Parliament does not know which farmer is going to get what. So as usual, this $3.5 billion, a huge chunk of this money is going to end up in the same ZANU-PF elites that have been looting our country. Then you've got urban land. Urban land is now dominated by land barons connected to the ruling party. The authorities themselves have spoken out against these huge land barons that have acquired massive pieces of land. The biggest land baron, as far as urban land is concerned, is a man called Kenneth Royden Sharp, who operates through the guise of a company called Oga Investments. He, through dubious agreements executed with the city of Harare, one to do with the construction of the Harare Airport Road, one to do with a development called Sunshine, in respect of which he undertook to provide development capital, and he failed, but got land. Thousands and thousands of hectares have been extracted, which are now being sold to unsuspecting members of the public. So that's a huge source of arbitrage, the land question, the agrarian question in Zimbabwe. Now, the land question now involves huge tracts of land that are being taken from communal occupiers, peasant farmers. We've seen the attempt by the government to dispossess the Shangani people in Chilonga. We've seen the further attempts to displace the Ndau people in Chipinge. Billy Rottenberg wants to expand his sugar estate. We have seen massive extraction of land in Hwange, where Chinese are now mining in national parks. So the land question is back again. As it was in 1890, the land question and land has become a major source of extraction 41 years after independence. What a shame. So if Cecil John Rhodes were to wake up today, you'll be in good company. Good company in the form of the present-day government. Good company in the form of Billy Rottenberg. Good company in the form of Kenneth Royden Sharp. I want to come to transport. Transport is a major source of extraction. I urge compatriots to read the report presented to Parliament by the Public Accounts Committee on Zinara. So here you've got major cartels. One of the major cartels is a company called Univen that is owned by a man called Lawrence Shea. He disingenuously supplied software to Zinara and then pretended that this software was a triple P, was a public-private entity. So as a result, he's getting 22 cents out of every dollar that is paid when you pay for your vehicle license. He's getting 18 cents out of $1 out of any toll gate fee. Then he's getting the inter-border transportation fee. It's not fair on the people of Zimbabwe. So every year he's getting around 140 million US dollars. Yet look at the state of our road. So Zinara right now, as it stands, essentially exists to work for Univen and Lawrence Shea. That is not fair. And as that report says, those agreements were executed illegally. They must be cancelled. Another form of corruption is ZUPCO. So the government of the day, through Statutory Instrument 83 of 2020, using the excuse of COVID, has now created a monopoly for ZUPCO. But ZUPCO has in fact been taken over by Kudata Gwirei and Sekunda. ZUPCO has received over 200 buses supplied by Landela Ventures, sourced from Belarus. Those buses are acquired at around 40,000, 58,000, yet they are being sold in excess of $200,000 to the CMED and to ZUPCO. So this has become a major source of looting. Contracts, private contracts, massive contracts are being dished out left, right and center without going to tender. These include contracts that have been issued to 5 companies that are in the process of rehabilitating the Beit Bridge Harare Road. One of those same contractors was given the contract to construct the Mbuyane statute. We have no problem with that, but please follow the law, go to tender. So massive contracts are now being dished out without going to tender. So you now see the emergence of tenderpreneurs in Zimbabwe. Then cigarettes. You have a man called Simon Radland and the Radland family. You have a company called Pacific Cigarettes that is owned by a man called Adam Molai. The levels of transfer pricing, the levels of invoicing, the levels of crude smuggling are huge, and Simon Radland is at the center of this, and then commanding heights. But the key players are Kudata Gwirei. Kudata Gwirei has got an array of companies. He's into everything: banking, agriculture, hospitals, chemicals, finance, and so forth. And his array of companies, some at home, some abroad, include Takutata Pty Limited South Africa, East Africa Supply and Trading Pty Limited South Africa, Suzako Investments Pty Limited South Africa, African Connection Logistics SI Pty Limited South Africa, ACL Bulk Packaging Solutions Pty Limited South Africa, Red Fox Management Pty Limited South Africa, Sotic South Africa Pty Limited South Africa, Biosite Investments Private Limited Zimbabwe, Bill Heights Investments Private Limited Zimbabwe, Bionist Investments Private Limited Zimbabwe, Landela Investments Private Limited Zimbabwe, Landela Mining Ventures Private Limited Zimbabwe, Landela Infrastructure Private Limited Zimbabwe, Secunda Holdings Private Limited Zimbabwe, Caladrias Investments Zimbabwe, Sotic International Limited Zimbabwe. Then missing from these are the banks he owns. Missing from this is the asset management company he owns. The list is extensive. The list is huge. But of course, there's White Capital, Bailey Rottenberg, John Bredenkamp, Z. Coronadis, Lawrence Shea, Kenneth Michael Rodan. So in the top 10 is Rigananda. You have to put Kudata Gwirei, you have to put Bailey Rottenberg, you have to put the Reserve Bank, you have to put Nick van Voogstostrat, you have to put the Macmillan brothers who are gold smugglers, you have to put the Radland families, you have to put the thousands of new multiple farm owners that are now owning our land. I guess I'll do a separate briefing on the land question so that we unmask these people. What is the solution? We think the solution to illicit financial flows and corruption is that the UN must come up with a convention that deals with illicit financial flows and money laundering. This convention should allow a specially created agency to look into these centers and havens of offshore financing, like Mauritius, the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and other, the Jersey Islands, so that Africa does not continue to bleed. If illicit financial flows were to be closed, then Africa doesn't need foreign aid. If Zimbabwe hemorrhage were to be stopped, and we were to harvest the $4 billion to $5 billion that is stolen from Zimbabwe, then we don't need foreign aid. So that international protocol, that international convention is important. Number two, Zimbabwe must join the extractive industry transparency front, EITFF. This is so key that we join this EITF. Third, the Anti-Corruption Commission must prosecute, must investigate. The National Prosecuting Authority. Prosecutions are key in order to deal and dismantle the tentacles of state capture in Zimbabwe. Fourth, we need new legislation. The current legislation is dwarfed by the developments in these cartels, by the developments in the forms of illicit financial extraction that is taking place. We need a new Mines and Minerals Act. We need a new enhanced Anti-Money Laundering Act. And we need a special task force within the Anti-Corruption Commission that is trained to deal with the sophisticated levels of extractive that is taking place. 5, we need a strong parliament. Parliament is so key. Look at the work that we were doing in the Public Accounts Committee. And we're able to do that work because we understand accounting, we understand economics, we understand law, we understand political economy. So we need a strengthened parliament to deal with and to bring to book the looting that is taking place. We need public officials to comply with Section 198 of the Constitution. There must be public disclosures of people's assets. So at the beginning of the year, every member of parliament, every government minister, every director, every head of a parastatal, every employee of a parastatal, middle level to senior level, must disclose their income, must disclose their assets, so that when we see you building a house on a hill in Borodale that has got lifts and 7 stories, we ask you, Mr. So-and-so, you are a mere civil servant. How are you affording to build this thing? So public disclosure is important. The principles of public accountability codified in Section 9, Chapter 9 of our Constitution must be complied with and followed with. Lastly, we need political change. Without political change, without free and fair elections, without a government elected by the people with legitimacy, without resolving the electoral issues, everything that I've said is a waste of time. So political change is the precondition to all these things. And lastly, we need an international community that is equal to the looting that is taking place in Zimbabwe. The kind of naivety and dishonesty we have seen from the IMF, that they turn a blind eye to this corruption, notwithstanding that only in 2019 they actually had a mission to Zimbabwe to deal with our vulnerabilities. Yet in their latest report of 16th June, they ignored that. So we don't want dishonesty and complicity by bodies such as the IMF, who are working with a very loose and complicity local, a very dishonest local, office.